Liverpool Reaction, an American LFC podcast, starts now.
All right, Coach. What a game. 2-0 victory. Liverpool beat Manchester City, are 11 points clear with 11 games to go. Wow.
Yeah, don't expect me to be unhappy today. So, great results and a very different way that the manager set the team up and they went about getting the result.
Yeah, Coach, an interesting lineup with the way they were set up, with both Curtis Jones and Dominik Szoboszlai being as number 10s, and the defending block shots, crosses that were supposed to be, I don't know, a little bit better from Manchester City's were just getting snuffed out left and right. Is defense, you think, what won this game? Because I feel like it was a big part of it.
Definitely. I think one thing that may have gone through his mind recently is there've been several games where maybe Liverpool have given away a couple of goals, whereas earlier in the season they were getting a lot of clean sheets, and if they did give up a goal, it would probably be one per game. So I don't think that you have to be a clairvoyant or anything to know that City are going to try and possess the ball. So if you look at the starting lineups for both teams, that kind of gave the clue of what was going to happen. So if you look at Manchester City, they had the two tricky wingers, Doku and Savinho. So they were going to put a lot of pressure on the fullbacks, which obviously other teams have done that, but they were really going to go for it. And from a Liverpool perspective, they put the box in the midfield with McAllister and Gravenberg, and then Jones and Szoboszlai in front of them. So definitely a different approach, but I think that from the outset, the goal was to sit in, be very tight defensively, knowing that Liverpool have players that can break. Salah on one side, Diaz, and then Szoboszlai. I mean, he just has incredible energy. He can get forward and then he can get back. So I think definitely that was a plan, playing from a tight defensive base.
One of the criticisms of Szoboszlai last year was adding goals to his game, and he's popping up here and there now more often and is scoring goals. Along with his energy, if he starts adding, say, 8 to 10 goals a season, I mean, this is an incredible type of purchase to get somebody like that, isn't it, Coach? I mean, it's a really, really critical aspect to what the team does.
Yeah. I mean, if you look back to the great Liverpool teams, the 70s and 80s, they had midfield players that could all score goals. And obviously they had Russian Dalglish at the same time. So if Russian Dalglish was shut down, which wasn't always the easiest thing to do, they could count on goals from the midfield. You had McDermott and players like that. They could all score. And so if Liverpool can add that to the array this year, then and in the future, then yeah, that's a big plus.
What did you think of the set play off the corner? It was really well executed, in my opinion, and it kind of shocked me how City didn't react at all. I mean, they were just kind of standing still.
Yeah, I think one thing that and I might have mentioned this before on a previous podcast, Liverpool haven't really given a great deal of attention to set plays. And that was clearly a set play that they had worked on. And it was brilliantly executed. Great layoff by Szoboszlai. And there was a deflection, but it was on target. So it was very well set up, and a goal. And that was the early goal that Liverpool needed and wanted.
Yeah, it kind of took a little bit of the pressure off, I think. And then Mohamed sets up Szoboszlai, and Szoboszlai gets a little bit fortunate as well. Ball goes in between some legs, but Ederson rooted and couldn't do anything about it. But overall, when we were countering, we looked dangerous.
For sure, for sure. Actually, just before that goal, the second goal, Liverpool played brilliantly, moving the ball from all the way in their own box right through. There was an overlap. I think it was Alexander-Arnold. And if he'd have looked up or he'd had a little more time, he would have seen, I think it was Szoboszlai or might have been Salah. One of them was totally open in front of the goal.
Yeah.
And if that had happened, that would have been definitely a contender for goal of the season, because it was just phenomenal play.
Yeah, I think it was Curtis Jones, because Szoboszlai was in the middle, who kind of shook off that defender with a little feint and really got the ball moving forward. I mean, yeah, that was really beautiful, the way they executed that. Coach, as we look forward here, I mean, we can start dreaming a little bit, right?
Well, as you know, I am definitely in the camp that until it's mathematically possible, but Liverpool do have a lot of things going for them. I mean, obviously an 11-point lead, by far the best goal difference. They've got 11 games left, 7 at Anfield. So these are all really, really big things in their favour, and the next 2 games, Newcastle and Southampton at Anfield. And if they get maximum points from those games, I mean, really, they can start to focus on the Champions League and the League Cup final. Really, I would imagine. But look, there's it's still. There's still 33 points to be played for, so who knows? But things are looking good.
I think the reason that Liverpool is in such a good shape is not only have they put themselves there by winning games, but also, Arsenal has a major problem, right? Chelsea is not playing very well. Manchester City has holes. So when you look at these teams kind of being in contention and pushing each other, those teams are really struggling, and the fact that Liverpool, okay, we have some problems of our own, but generally speaking, we are, we're healthy. We have a goal scorer in Mo Salah. We have a great front line when Diaz or Gakpo on the left, and then you can do whatever as far as the center forward goes with Jota or Nunez, or do this double number 10 situation that they did today. There's a lot going for Liverpool, but realistically, I think we do have to mention that the other teams have major issues as well.
Right. As we're saying here, it's looking good. Liverpool, if they win the title this year, it's because they've been the most consistent team. And so I know people have talked about them having a blip because they came into the game with having drawn 4 of the last 8 games. But, I mean, back in and we always seem to talk about this every podcast, back in the pre-Etihad Manchester City, Pep Guardiola era, I mean, this was pretty normal. Teams would win the league and they'd maybe lose a few games and they'd draw a few games. And it wasn't a situation where you had to win every single game. And if you dropped a point, it was like a disaster. So, yeah, things are kind of falling back into normal again. And Liverpool have been very consistent this year.
I was doing the pre-match show with Scousers, and I mentioned that I gave you credit for it, but also was mentioning how you've talked about this several times on the podcast, and that our vision right now is just so we just are thinking of the last 5-6 years and what it's looked like to win the league, but prior to that, 78, 80, 82 points was like, a good season and usually could take the title. It wasn't the 99 points and 97 points and 100 points of the past, 4, 5, 6 seasons that's not the norm. But because it's happened so often in recent history, we kind of have that thought process. And they all kind of agreed with that thought. So, Coach, that is a very very thought-provoking idea, because it is true, but also we have kind of that recency bias that kind of skews our idea a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that's a major reason why we definitely have this group of Liverpool fans who are kind of freaking out, whenever things don't quite go the way that we want them to go. So we drew at Aston Villa. It's not the end of the world. Villa's a good team. Villa Park, when they raise their game, it's a tough place to go. And so I think in that particular game, Liverpool can only blame themselves because they missed a lot of very presentable chances. But on the flip side, as we said at the time, Villa had 2 fantastic chances in the dying minutes there, and so that to me is normal football again. It's not kind of okay, you score in the first 10 minutes and that's the game over, which has kind of been the Manchester City era for the last few years.
Coach, when we look at this team competing on 2 fronts potentially here with, 3, I guess, realistically, and I think did we draw PSG? Is that who we drew in Champions League?
Yeah. I mean, Liverpool's in the tougher half of the draw, so yeah, PSG is up next.
Is this going to impact the season, do you think, or can we really make a run at a treble?
I think, I think definitely. But I mean, to be realistic, I think out of the 3, I think the Champions League will be the hardest. I mean, the League Cup final is a one-off game and it can go either way. I watched Newcastle today, and we're going to see them at Anfield on Wednesday. And Newcastle was superb in the first half and kind of lost their way in the second half. And so they have this general malaise that we've just been talking about, which is they're inconsistent. And so one minute they're very dangerous, the next they're vulnerable. So the League Cup game is a one-off. I think the Premier League, Liverpool have they have a commanding position that they're in. The Champions League, I believe the way that it goes is PSG. And if Liverpool advance, they would play the winner of Aston Villa and Bruges, I believe. So you'd have to think that that's going to be Aston Villa again.
Right.
And then I'm not sure if I think they're in the same half of the draw as Arsenal, actually, as well. So Arsenal could be the semi-final, or is it Real Madrid? Real Madrid or Arsenal, I think, would be the other game. And so Real Madrid, as we all know, they pull their socks up to win the Champions League every year. I mean, I think that Liverpool dominated them in the group stage, but there'll be a totally different animal when it comes down to the knockouts. The advantage that Liverpool has at this time when it comes to Champions League is they know that every second leg is at Anfield. So that was the one thing that was positive in terms of getting the
number 1 seed.
Yeah. I mean, so basically, and I guess we're just learning this new system. Even if Liverpool had come second, basically they'd still be in the same situation. So I think if teams want to get into that position in future years, that they've got to aim to finish first or second, because that guarantees whoever they play in the knockouts that that they get the second leg at their home stadium.
And that's a massive advantage from Liverpool standpoint. Anfield is like a 12th man. The passion, the songs, the heat of the stadium, absolutely a huge feather in our cap and an advantage for us.
Oh yes, yeah. Given the history and the DNA of the club, definitely.
Coach, when we look ahead at Newcastle, last game was a 3-3 draw. Easily could have been a 3-2 win, but it was an exciting game. Lot of goals with 6 goals. What do you anticipate, a similar type of game, or should we kind of lock in what we did today with Newcastle, understanding that maybe they're not Manchester City, but also maybe they're better than Manchester City this year. So do we do something like that? What are your thoughts?
Well, it's hard to say that they're better than Manchester City because City creamed them a week ago.
Yeah,
so.
They did crush them. That's true. Yeah.
So no, I think the big thing with Newcastle is what I said earlier. I mean, like they just have kind of a wide spectrum in terms of what turns up on the day. I mean, if you think back to the game at St James's Park, the first half Newcastle were definitely on top. But then Liverpool got on top in the second half.
Mm-hmm.
And I think from a Newcastle point of view, that they'll probably try to keep it tight. But they do have players. I mean, like they have a lot of pace up front.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one thing that's very different for a Liverpool game that we saw today is a typical Liverpool game, like they have the majority of the possession, the majority of the time the ball's in the opponent's half, and then the opponent's counter. Now, it was the other way around today. Because if you think of it, I mean, I don't think Manchester City really created a big chance in the whole game.
Not really.
But Liverpool had several, because when they broke, they just have so much space. So I think we'll see the boot on the other foot when it comes to Wednesday. I think Newcastle will keep it tight, and then Gordon, Isak, and Murphy up front all have some serious pace, and so they'll look to counter. So I think it's going to be that kind of a game.
So when you look at a lineup for that game, is there a preferred lineup, you think? Is it just go with what we did today, or is there room for Jota or Darwin up front?
Personally, I mean, I would put players on that put pressure on the central defenders.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not Arne Slot does that, because his philosophy is slightly different. So both Nunes and Jota would put pressure on the Newcastle defenders. Diaz, when he plays centrally, doesn't really do that because he tends to drop back.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, thinking of the game today, City's plan was the wide men, and so Liverpool could go with that against Newcastle. But then, even though they put a lot of pressure on the fullbacks, even if they got into good situations, there were no real players in the box to exploit any good work that they did. So I think that's one thing that Liverpool have to be careful of, because Newcastle has dominating defenders. They have big guys, physically strong, dominant, Botman, Shaw, and then they pull in Burn as well. Like he's a fullback, but they'll pull him into the middle if they need to as well. So Liverpool, for me, need to be putting pressure on those players rather than making it easy and having a Diaz who drops back into the midfield. So I guess one way that he might go into the game is thinking of Gakpo. Does he start him or does he bring him on? I'll be surprised if he starts Diaz, because I think Nunes or Jota, I think one of those is going to start, probably Jota.
Yeah.
So I think he'll be keeping in mind that there's somebody in the middle because, as I say, you need to put some degree of pressure on Newcastle's defenders.
Coach, you mentioned the winger attack that City employed today, and when you're kind of looking at it, it was enough to make you nervous from a standpoint of, oh, Doku gave us fits when he came in towards the end of the last game at Anfield. He was just basically doing everything he did in the first half today. But like you mentioned, there was nobody waiting there. And the fact that Holland wasn't there, but every ball was getting snuffed out. And then, Trent was having a really, really difficult time until it was clear that Mo was helping him and Szoboszlai was helping him. And they made sure that there was two guys on there to make sure that he doesn't do that continuously, even though he did it many times. And then Savinho on the other side, looks like they focus more on Doku. But is this the way to attack Liverpool, is to attack these defenders? Or is it just City has really good wingers that are adept to doing this?
Well, I think that blueprint was already there in previous games. I mean, teams going back to the Jurgen Klopp era would always station somebody out on the left wing and then look to play the ball in behind. So in one sense, it's nothing new. I think it's just because Manchester City have trickier, better players in those positions, and they were continually feeding them the whole time. And so I think it was they were just trying to build up pressure all the time. And whilst Doku often had the beating of Alexander-Arnold, there was just too much cover.
Yeah.
And as we noted previously, even if he got the ball into the box, I mean, basically, it was Marmoush and Foden, if they could get into position, versus Van Dijk and Konate, and it was a mismatch in terms of the physical side of it.
Coach, when we look at Van Dijk and Mo Salah, let's just, for sake of this argument, assume that Trent is moving on. Out of these two, is it more critical to keep Van Dijk or Mo Salah? Just for argument's sake, who do you feel is the more important person moving forward? And I know it's difficult because they're both very, very good. They're our top two players. There's, there's no real right answer, but just curious what your thoughts are there.
Well, it's a difficult question. I suppose the coaching side of me says Van Dijk, because he brings a lot in terms of leadership and organization. But I think the fan side of me says Salah, because you just have to look at his stats, basically. The goals.
It's bonkers. Yeah.
And it's every year, it's not just 1 year, it's every year. I suppose that if you look at the squad right now, Liverpool have a lot of good attacking options. And if Salah was to leave, it would, you can't replace him, but it's like you can't replace Suarez, you can't replace Torres, you can't replace Michael Owen, like you're going back. But in a funny way, somebody else always emerges. So you've got other players there that can score goals. And then you've got a player like a Jayden Dan coming through as well, who I believe is a real prospect. I mean, I think he's always going to be a bit part player, but maybe in another 3-4 years' time, if he keeps developing, then I think he could be a serious goal scorer because he's got a lot of tools and he's got a lot of potential.
Well, Coach, I mean, great result today. A very convincing win. It was 2-0, but it really didn't feel in doubt, although probably like all Liverpool fans, we're on the edge of our seats. The great performance. Coach, what else can we say about Arne Slot? I mean, comes in from a league that is one of the lower leagues in Europe, And granted, he had a team that has stayed together for a little bit, and there wasn't a lot of change. I mean, tactically, he's pretty impressive.
He is, and I think he showed another string to his bow today. I mean, because if you look at the game, whilst Manchester City had the majority of possession, and you can say, oh, well, they had more shots, but they didn't really create chances. Liverpool control the game in a totally different way from what we've seen this season to date. And arguably, I'm not big on all this XG and everything, but I would have to believe that in terms of XG, that Liverpool created a more big chances today because they had time and they had space when they broke. Manchester City were never afforded that by Liverpool because of the way that they were set up. So that clearly is down to the manager. And then the players have to take credit because they executed it perfectly.
Yeah, it seemed every time the ball was, I don't know, call it 35 yards and in Manchester City attacking Liverpool's side, every time the ball was kind of being swung across slowly from player to player, a Liverpool defender would step up to make sure that there wasn't an easy pass into the box or anything. So when you look at the tactics overall, it was a sit in and pop out as the person in your area got the ball. And they did it time and time again. I was really watching that and didn't see an instance or two where that did not happen. So, when you mention credit to the players, it was a great performance. It was really, really an overall great performance. And I think the future with this type of tactician and the way he's communicating to the players so they completely understand what their role is and how to navigate certain situations is really, really a great tool to have for the future.
Definitely, for sure. So yeah, I mean, I was very interested to see Pep Guardiola say that he thought that his team played well. I'm not sure if he really believes that. I mean, like, they had a lot of possession, but they were very ponderous in possession. And then when the two wide men did have some joy and some success, obviously there was no Erling Haaland there to get them out of jail anymore. So I've no doubt that they'll go out in the summer and they'll spend a whole bunch more money and what have you. But I think he's being tested to some degree in a way that he's never been tested before, and I think the results have shown that this season.
Yeah. All right, Coach. Well, 11 points clear, 11 games to go, 7 at Anfield. What else could you really ask for, right, Coach? If we at the beginning of the season said this would be the situation with 11 games to go, we would both have said, yes, we'll take it.
Oh, definitely.
And yeah, and here we are now with, the light at the end of the tunnel, a lot of games at home. This game could be over sooner than later, but I understand the one game at a time mentality. It seems like the team really embodies that. The coach definitely embodies that. So although we can look ahead and kind of start smiling a little bit, it's nice to know that in the trenches, these guys are still working hard and, aren't cracking a smile yet.
Yeah. I mean, Wednesday again is another big night, and there's a lot of pressure on Arsenal because they go to Nottingham Forest that night.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, let's see what happens.
Coach, when you think about the Nottingham Forest defense and the lack of a sharp attack right now from Arsenal's standpoint, I mean, realistically, there's drop points possibility there, like a strong possibility.
You would think so, but I mean, who knows? I mean, when it was closer between Liverpool and Arsenal, I know everybody's been focusing on the fact, that they're short-handed up front, and clearly that is a concern. They are very good at the back, And so there's an old saying about 1-0 to Arsenal, like it goes back to previous regimes and coaches and what have you. But if they're tight at the back and they only need one chance, and if they score a goal, then maybe they could get a run going. But unfortunately, from their perspective, unfortunately from ours, I think the West Ham result yesterday kind of psychologically makes that scenario a lot more difficult. But yeah. Let's see what happens Wednesday, and I'm not going to get too far ahead of myself here.
Yeah, I hear you, Coach. That's the first time I've seen you kind of almost say it there. Well, everybody, thank you so much for watching, and those listening via podcasts, we are doing our live streams on YouTube. Please subscribe. Please help us grow our community. You can also, if you just want to listen to the audio version, it is on everywhere you listen to your podcast. So we're happy either way if you guys are just watching or listening. So on behalf of Coach and I and Liverpool fans across the globe, oh man, 11 games left, 11 points clear. Come on, boys, just keep it going, and we'll be smiling sooner than later, hopefully.
Yep.
All right, everybody. Well, thanks again and take care. We'll talk to you next time.
Okay, bye now.